Starting off this countdown, we have Donald Harvey, aka the Angel of Death. Donald Harvey is a nurse turned serial killer. So he was working in a hospital as a nurse and was secretly killing off his patients. To him, he was doing them a favor. He thought that his chronically ill patients needed a relief from the pain, so he would smother them with pillows or would poison them or let their oxygen tanks run out. It's believed that he took the lives of over 70 people. However, in 1987, he was only convicted for 37 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life plus 20 years. In March of 2017, Harvey was beat up badly by a fellow inmate. He passed away shortly after. Moving on to number 9, we have the Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez, otherwise known as the Night Stalker, was an American serial killer and robber who killed 13 to 16 plus individuals. At his trials, the judge stated that he never showed any remorse for these doings. I think the creepiest part about his interview is when he admits to being evil.
Do you admit to being evil, Richard?
We are all evil in some form or another, are we not? Yes, I am evil. Not 100%, but I am evil.
And we see him try to justify his killings by saying the government does worse things to people than what he has done.
Serial killers do on a small scale what governments do on a large one. They are a product of the times, and these are bloodthirsty times. Even psychopaths have emotions if you dig deep enough, but then again, maybe they don't.
In our 8th spot, we have Ronnie McPeters. Now, Ronnie McPeters has actually been deemed too insane to execute. So Ronnie was first arrested after taking the life of a 27-year-old woman. The woman, Linda Marie Baltazar, was running errands when Ronnie came up to her window while panhandling. She shooed him away and he left. But he ended up coming back and shooting her. He was first placed in jail for his crime and then placed in the rubber room. But that didn't stop him because he was known to set fires in the jail and harass other inmates. So they moved him to San Quentin prison where he was awaiting death row. And that's when he started acting even crazier. Apparently he would attack other prisoners and guards, and was known to smear his feces all over his cell and even himself. This behavior got him off of death row. They literally thought that he was far too troubled to be executed. In our 7th spot, we have Mark Chopper Reed. Mark Reed is an Australian criminal who lived a life of crime. He was known to rip off drug dealers, as well as he would kidnap and torture members of the criminal underworld. It's believed that he was responsible for the death of 19 people and the attempted murder of 11 others. In fact, the movie Chopper is based off of his life, and it's a wild movie. The things he would do were insane. For example, he had a fellow inmate cut both of his ears off so that he could leave H Division and be transferred to a different wing. He also once played Russian roulette with himself. Who does that for fun? In our 6th spot today, we have Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer is one of the most famous serial killers in the world. People all around the world know of him and the sadistic and disturbing crimes that he committed. From 1978 to 1991, Jeffrey murdered and dismembered 17 male individuals. What he did afterwards was even more disturbing. He would keep some of the body parts as souvenirs, even take photographs of the deceased. When police searched his home, they found it littered with human remains. Dahmer was finally arrested on July 22nd of 1991. However, while in prison, there were multiple attempts on his life. On November 28, 1994, an inmate, Christopher Scarver, finally succeeded at taking Dahmer's life. His reasoning behind this? Well, apparently Dahmer was known to taunt others in prison. He would do this by making his prison food look like severed limbs to taunt the other people. He would even drizzle ketchup on top of his blood. Christopher and others found this very unnerving, so he decided to take action against him and beat him to death. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Jason Barnum, aka better known as Eyeball Man. And that's because he literally has a tattoo on his eyeball. Like, he tattooed it completely black. If that doesn't speak volumes about who he is, then I don't know what does. He also has one side of his face tattooed to look like a skull. So not only does this dude look like a scary prisoner, but he is one. This dude has a long list of crimes under his belt, including possession of heroin, first-degree attempted murder, first-degree burglary, and third-degree felony in possession of a weapon. In fact, he was sentenced to 22 years in jail after shooting a police officer. Moving on to number 4, we have NIKKO Jenkins. This guy is one of the scariest inmates in the world. Some say he's the craziest inmate in the world, and you're about to find out why. One time, he killed a man just because he stared at him the wrong way. Not only that, but in court, Jenkins was known to speak in some weird language. He said he used this language to communicate with an Egyptian serpent god, and this god was the one giving him orders to kill people. He also enjoyed talking about the people he killed and smiled the whole time while doing so. In the end, he was convicted for killing 4 individuals. Moving on to number 3, we have Damien FOWKES. In 2002, Damien FOWKES was sentenced to 12 years for a series of armed robberies that he had committed. But while in jail, he committed even more crimes. In 2010, he attempted to kill another prison inmate. He made a DIY shank by melting a razor blade onto plastic cutlery, and he used it to slice a guy's throat. As a result, he was transferred to a higher security prison. But that did not stop him. A year later, he killed an inmate by strangling him to death with strips of his bedding. These attacks gained him the title of being an extremely dangerous prisoner. In our second spot today, we have Alexander PICHUSHKIN. Alexander is a Russian serial killer who wanted to complete the number of squares on a chessboard by killing 64 people. It's said that he has killed around at least 49 individuals and possibly as many as 60. In fact, he was inspired by another serial killer, Andrei Chikatilo, who I have talked about before. In his mind, he wanted to compete with him and kill even more individuals than Andrei did. Now, what I find the weirdest is when Alexander was young, he was said to be such a kind and sociable child. That was until one day when he got struck in the head by a swing. From then on, his whole demeanor completely changed and he got really aggressive. So they think that this accident turned him into a serial killer. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Pedro Rodrigues FILHO, aka the Brazilian Maniac. This guy is a Brazilian serial killer who claims to have taken the lives of 100 individuals. He started killing at a young age, one of the first kills being his father. He apparently killed his father with a machete, cut out his heart, and then chewed on it. He also has been known to kill and torture a number of gang members. He did this all before he was 18. He was arrested on May 24th of 1973, during which he was placed in a car with another criminal who he killed for no reason. And while in prison, he went on to kill more people. It's said that he took the lives of 47 inmates in jail alone. Pedro served 42 years in prison before his release in 2018. Yes, he killed that many people and then he got released. Starting off this countdown, we have Nanny Doss. Nanny Doss, otherwise known as Nancy Hazel, was a seemingly innocent and sweet woman. But what people didn't know was that she took the lives of almost a dozen people between 1920 to 1954. She targeted people all across the South and Midwest, including her own family members. She apparently poisoned 4 of her husbands, her 2 sisters, her grandson, her mother-in-law, and her mother. She may have also poisoned her daughters. All were killed for different reasons. Some for money, some to avoid caring for them, etc. What's creepy is that she was nicknamed the Giggling Grandma. Why? Well, because every time she would tell the story of how she killed her late husbands, she laughed hysterically. In our 9th spot, we have Albert DeSalvo. Albert DeSalvo, better known as the Boston Strangler, took the lives of 13 women between 1962 and 1964. He would strangle these women with a piece of their clothing before taking advantage of them. In January of 1967, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. A month later, him and 2 other inmates actually managed to escape from prison, and a full-scale manhunt ensued. Thankfully, it wasn't long until he was recaptured. However, in 1973, Albert was stabbed to death by another prisoner. Moving on to number 8, we have Henri Désiré Landru. Henri was a French serial killer who took the lives of at least 7 women between 1915 to 1919. He did so by placing ads in newspapers pretending to be a wealthy widower who was interested in meeting a new bride. A lot of women who had lost their husbands in World War I responded to this ad thinking that it was meant to be, like how easy, and he's got money. Sadly, they would be lured to his home, robbed, and then killed. After doing so, they were dismembered and burned in the oven. Very gruesome, I know. He was finally caught when the sister of one of his victims tracked him down and convinced police that he was the one who killed her sister. And she was right. He was convicted in November of 1921 and sentenced to death by the guillotine. Moving on to number 7, we have Harold Shipman, aka Dr. Death. He was given this name because he was a doctor that killed at least 218 of his patients. So he was practicing in London from 1972 to 1998. During this time, he would kill innocent patients. In fact, he is said to be one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history. Like, imagine going to a hospital thinking that they're going to save you, and instead, they kill you. He wasn't caught until people were like, wow, a lot of elderly women die when you're on duty. What's up with that? And then they noticed that his name was on a number of cremation certificates. So they got suspicious of him, and he was later caught and convicted in 2000. In our 6th spot today, we have Jane Topman. Here we have another medical professional who was also a serial killer. Jane Topman was a medical nurse fascinated with death. To others, she seemed like a dedicated, hardworking, and loving nurse. But in reality, she conducted a number of experiments on her patients. For example, she would give them a bunch of different drugs just to see what they would do to them. She also had the tendency to push her patients right to the edge of death and then bring them back to life and then kill them again. And then she developed this unhealthy obsession with autopsies. Jane was arrested in 1901 and admitted to taking the lives of 31 individuals, although the number could be much higher. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Vera Renzi. She was a Romanian serial killer given the name the Black Widow. This was due to the fact that she killed her 2 husbands as well as her multiple lovers. It's believed that she poisoned and killed at least 35 individuals, including her own son. And that's because her son was onto her and one day found coffins in the wine cellar and was like, I'm gonna call the police on you, Mom. So she poisoned him to keep him from doing so. Later, the police grew suspicious of her because of the disappearance of one of her lovers. They investigated her home and found 32 unburied zinc-lined coffins, each containing a male corpse. She was then arrested and confessed to everything. In our 4th spot today, we have Emperor Caligula. Now, this dude was the 3rd emperor during the Roman Empire, and he literally was insane. Like, the stuff he did is just the definition of disturbing. Like, I don't think they can teach you about what he did in history class. It's that bad. So this guy was known to do messed up things to his prisoners. Like, he would grill them alive or chew on their no-go parts. He also just liked killing people for fun or watching people get tortured. In particular, he enjoyed watching innocent people get killed and eaten by wild animals. He was so crazy, people thought like he had some sort of ailment and that's what was causing him to do these things and be so messed up. In our 3rd spot, we have VLAD the Impaler. Now, this dude was known as the real-life Dracula. In fact, the character Dracula was loosely based off of him. Like, in order for you to have a monster created off of you, you have to be a monster yourself. So this guy would do dark things like dip his bread in the blood of his enemies and then enjoy it. That's where the legend of Dracula sucking blood came from, because he would suck the blood out from his soggy bread. But he is most famously known for impaling his victims, hence why he's called Vlad the Impaler. This guy would impale people to death, just shove them on the stick so that it would come out their mouth, and then just leave them there. It's said that between 1448 to 1462, he killed about 20% of the population, which is a lot. Moving on to number 2, we have Shiro Ishii. Now, the things that this man got away with are disgusting. He's literally the definition of mad scientist. So in 1936, this dude built a huge compound to perform a number of disturbing experiments in. This place was called Unit 732. Some experiments included getting women pregnant by his fellow scientists and then cutting open these women to study them while pregnant. He was also known to amputate limbs and then reattach them to other parts of the victims' bodies, or he would freeze body parts so that he could study what would happen if you didn't treat gangrene. Trust me, it gets worse. Other prisoners were his test subjects for grenades and flamethrowers. Everything he did was horrific, and he was sadistic. He loved torturing people and running disturbing experiments on them. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Pol Pot. Pol Pot was the Prime Minister of Cambodia from 1976 to 1979. During his reign, he cleansed a fourth of his own nation. He wanted to destroy the civilization and turn it into a new age. So he ordered a genocide against his whole country. As a result, millions of Cambodians were displaced, tortured, and killed. Others were forced to work in a field fertilized by human bodies. And if you stopped working, you would either be punished by not being fed or by death. And if you made a mistake while working, you were also killed. Many people literally worked themselves to death. I could do a whole top 10 list on the dark things that this man has done. Like, it's that much, you know? He literally killed up to 3 million Cambodians. That's literally 25 to 33% of his country. Starting off this countdown, we have Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos is often considered the first female serial killer. She was found guilty of killing 7 men. She would murder them, rob them, and then drive home in their cars. Although she claims every murder was self-defense. In our interview, we can see how lax she is when talking about killing.
Just shot in self-defense, boom, boom, boom. You know, they weren't cut up, they weren't sliced up, no OJ jazz, you know. And he said, I did the most horrendous crime in the whole wide world.
Death and murder literally doesn't faze her at all. In fact, she claims that what she did wasn't even bad. Yeah, she tries to justify her actions by saying she just shot them, as if that's not a big deal.
But you've been convicted of killing 7 men.
Everybody's looking at the number.
Does that not, you killed 7 men, 7 strangers, does that not make you a serial killer?
So I didn't kill them every day, did I?
Again, she's acting like her killing 7 men isn't a big deal. Like, oh, it's just 7 men, people have done worse. It's crazy. In our 9th spot, we have Maximilien Robespierre. Maximilien Robespierre was a French lawyer who eventually became one of the most influential figures of the French Revolution. At first, he started out as a strong and great leader, until he became obsessed with the guillotine. He started encouraging more and more people to become executed. More than 17,000 enemies of the revolution were killed as a result, or anyone suspected to be an enemy. So basically, innocent people were killed. That's not all. In a span of 10 months, he took the lives of over 40,000 people, which is absolutely insane. That's like killing 4,000 people a month. Another point is that he lived by the motto, killing is better than forgiving, which is something a psychopath would say. In our 8th spot, we have Edward Edwards. Edward Wayne Edwards, otherwise known as the Hook Man or the Man with the Hook, was an American con artist turned serial killer. In fact, when he committed his long list of crimes, he never wore a mask because he wanted to be famous. In 2010, he did an interview and confessed to all his crimes. Again, it makes me so uncomfortable listening to how killers took someone's life.
Taking his hand, he's going through the bottom of the duffel bag trying to find the cigarettes, and I'm standing right here. And I have the sawed-off shotgun, and I ease it out of the bag while Danny's down there looking, and
He's just too calm talking about all of this. During the interview, he also stated that he wanted the death penalty and thinks that he deserves it.
I want the death penalty.
You don't want us to be in prison for a long time on everything else that's been going on.
Right, I'm not a healthy man.
In our 7th spot, we have Paris Bennett. During an interview with Piers Morgan, Paris Bennett, who at 13 years of age killed his young sister, admits that he did this as a way to punish his mother.
Specifically in the end,
yes,
to cause your mother maximum pain. This has achieved your goal, which was to effectively mean your mother lost both her children at once.
In 2007, Bennett convinced their babysitter to leave early and then proceeded to stab his sister 17 times. It's such a tragic case. What makes it worse is how he pretends to say he loved his sister. In the interview, he was asked to describe why he loved his sister, and he couldn't.
Because I loved her. I loved her with every fiber of my being.
They say it's like asking a colorblind person to describe the color red. They can't do it. He can't describe love because he can't feel it.
Exactly like she said, it's because Paris is incapable of feeling emotions. No guilt, no love, nothing. Moving on to number 6, we have Angela Simpson.
Right.
You murdered this man.
Yes.
You tortured him.
Of course.
This is an interview with killer Angela Simpson. She was arrested after torturing and killing a man in a wheelchair for snitching. During this interview, she tells exactly what happened, how she did it, and why. The scariest part is how forward she is about this all. She doesn't care that she's going to prison or that she killed someone.
You're not here to pretend to be remorseful.
Of course not. Why would I do that?
Are you remorseful?
Not at all.
She's not remorseful at all, and she's very open about everything.
To my house, walked him down the street. I don't know why the media acts like the motherfucker couldn't walk. He walked very well. Walked him upstairs, kicked his ass.
Like, imagine being okay with taking someone's life. This interview sends shivers down my spine just listening to her and watching the stillness in her body and the calmness in her voice. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Manuel VELA. In 2016, a 28-year-old man, Manuel VELA, was arrested after killing his girlfriend and their unborn baby. In this interview, you can tell that Manuel suffered from schizophrenia. He claims that the father told him to kill his girlfriend and her baby. Keep in mind, he is the father to her baby. And then he says that he is the Antichrist.
And that's where I cut her open, when he told me to.
Who told you to?
The father, it's just the same one who was to communicate with Jesus Christ is when he was there.
Although it seems like he is intoxicated during this interview, he is not. He's just experiencing hallucinations and delusions. In this interview, he also claims he would receive commands from outer space and extraterrestrials. A lot of people found this interview disturbing just because you can see how far gone Manuel is. He's no longer in control of himself. In our 4th spot, we have Arthur Shawcross. Arthur John Shawcross was an American serial killer in Rochester, New York that took the lives of 13 individuals. His first 2 murders were committed in 1972. He was caught for both and then sentenced to 25 years. But after serving 15 years, he was released on parole. That's when he continued on with the killings and took the lives of 11 different people. His interview is creepy for a number of reasons.
Do you remember killing her?
Yeah, possibly.
He gives me the chills. He's just twitching and his voice is just so unnerving. But it gets worse once he starts talking about his crimes.
How did you kill her?
Probably strangulation.
How do you know when they're dead?
How? I don't know, just do.
You can see that he won't admit it directly. He says maybe he killed her and maybe she died by strangulation. It gets worse.
I reach over my shoulder like this, right behind my neck, and I pull out a brand new machete. When she backed out, I come up behind her.
He's just a ruthless killer. In our 3rd spot, we have Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was an infamous serial killer who was responsible for murdering 30 women. Although it's thought that this number may be even higher. He would often kill these women in brutal ways. In his interviews, he shows no remorse for his actions, and the calm tone of his voice is very disturbing.
I can see how certain feelings and ideas developed in me to the point where I began to act out on them. Certain very violent and very destructive feelings.
Throughout this whole interview, Bundy tries to gain sympathy from the interviewer and the audience. You can see how he's trying to manipulate your emotions, which is terrifying. A lot of people commented saying that Bundy is trying to act human in these interviews. He knows exactly what to say and how to say it to manipulate you.
It was like something had, say, snapped, that I knew that I couldn't control it anymore, that these barriers that I had learned as a child, that had been instilled in me, were not enough to hold me back with respect to seeking out and harming somebody.
It's a huge reason why he was so famous and had a huge media following. Moving on at number 2, we have Beth Thomas. Beth Thomas was a young girl featured in a documentary titled The Child of Rage. At such a young age, Beth displayed psychopathic tendencies, including harming her brother on a number of occasions and trying to kill her parents. Her parents were terrified of her and her brother Jonathan's safety, as they should be. Take a look at her interview.
Why is your brother afraid of you?
Because I hurt him so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what, at nighttime, what do your parents do to your door?
Lock it shut.
Why do they lock it shut?
Because they don't want me to hurt John.
So on a number of occasions, Beth would go into her brother's room at night to try and kill him. On top of that, she used to steal knives from the kitchen to try and harm her family with.
Big sharp ones.
And what do you want to do with those knives?
Kill John and Mommy with them, and Daddy.
That's not all. Here is her recounting the time she hurt Jonathan.
And what happened to your brother? Tell me about it.
His head hurt real bad, but his chin, he had to have stitches in it.
Now apparently doctors deemed that she acted this way as part of her traumatic past. Now it's said that after years of therapy, she is now a healthy adult. And in our number 1 spot, we have Jeffrey Dahmer.
I desensitized myself to it. I don't know, I went to great lengths.
Between 1878 to 1991, American serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer murdered and dismembered 17 men and boys. He would pack the victims' body parts into plastic bags and bury them behind his parents' home. He would also take disturbing photographs of his deceased victims and keep certain body parts as souvenirs. He also had tendencies to eat the victims. This gave him the name the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster. Upon searching his home, police found albums full of pictures of body parts, and his place was filled with human remains. Before his death, Jeffrey had an interview with Inside Edition and other news channels. In these interviews, he shares gory details about the men he killed and why he did it.
One time I brought this young man back to the hotel room, the Ambassador Hotel. Was just planning on drugging him and spending the night with him. Had no intention of hurting him.
What's creepy is how calm he is talking about all this. Like he's murdered so many people and shows no remorse, just like all the other serial killers on this list.
I was handcuffed, and it was just the realization that there was no point in trying to hide my actions anymore.
Hearing him say that he kept the dead with him as long as possible makes me sick. When police raided his house, they found heads were in the fridge and freezer, 2 skulls were on display in the house, and they found a 57-gallon drum filled with decomposing bodies in his room.